what I like about my life as an artist, right? That there's like this particular path that you take and like decisions you make, interests, things you're interested in, things you practice, like, with an instrument, like all of that contributes to who you are and well, maybe who you become as a musician. And I love that. And I love kind of like observing that in others. I love observing that about myself and seeing how over decades now for me, things change. But I don't really see it as, like 30 years ago, let's say, or let's say 25 years ago, right? In the early 2000s, I was already making good music. It's not like looking back, I would say like that older me made shit music and I needed 25 more years to make good music. No, not at all. I think we can, as human beings generally kind of like always be like the best we can be at any time in our lives. And with the best, I don't mean that you have to be the best. I don't mean that at all. Like we can do something that comes sort of like from the heart, and that we love, that we with music, it was always like that for me. I created the music that I wanted to hear, that nobody else was making. That's what motivated me and still does.
Listen to the vibes.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Listen to the Vibes. I'm very happy and very privileged to welcome Markus Reuter here. And he has a new album out called Sea of Hopeless Angels. We're going to get to know him and talk a little bit about the album. So let's kick this off right. Markus, tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Very nice to meet you, Kyle.
Thank you.
Yeah, about myself. Yeah, that's a deep question. No, I love music. I'm a musician from birth, I would say. I really discovered it when I was 10 years old. I'm 51 now, so it's been like almost like 40 years sort of like working on the craft of making music, and I approach it from all I love all angles. Like originally I wasn't even thinking there that I would ever become a performer because I was more interested in composing, like, and production, for lack of a better term, right? So creating sound worlds. And then it turned out, at age 20, 21, 22, that I actually needed to learn to play an instrument to make sure that my ideas actually become a reality. Right. So I started, I mean, I went to music school and stuff like that in my youth, but really I was 20 years old when I understood that it's something that I can and should practice, and make part of my life. And I ended up like in the circle of or the family of King Crimson, right? Somehow, which was interesting because I remember when I was like 18 or 19 years old, I heard in the Court of the Crimson King, which did not speak to me at all when I first listened to it, right? But then I like just a few weeks later, I heard Discipline from the album from 1981. And that spoke to me immediately. And it was like this feeling, okay, there are people out there that sort of like make the music that lives inside me. I really had that sort of like feeling when I first heard it. And fast forward another, um, what is it, like 15 years or something, and I ended up playing with Tony Levin and Pat Mastelotto, in a band called Stickman. And obviously there are more steps leading to that. But anyway, and yeah, I play a very unique kind of instrument, which is I call it a touch guitar. It's like a tapping instrument. It's a guitar instrument that I play with all eight fingers on the fretboard on the strings, so I don't have to pluck and fret. I just fret and pluck with one finger in a way. And it's something that I have like, yeah, played exclusively for 30 years now, and it's a really wonderful, very expressive, um emotion, like it's an instrument that you can emote with. It's really, there's something that is just very deep and very beautiful, but it doesn't sound like a regular guitar. It doesn't sound like a piano or anything like that. And like these albums that I've started producing just like 2, 3 years ago, basically start out from the acoustic, so the clean sound of the touch guitar, and Sea of Hopeless Angels is like that as well. So that album is based on a series of improvisations I played in the studio in Dresden, Germany, while I was doing a recording session with my band Anchor and Burden, which is an experimental rock band from Germany. Um, and I just like took a 45-minute slot that we had, and I said, okay, now let me just make some solo recordings. And I just played, and we recorded that, we filmed that. So there's footage for all the, video footage for all the songs as well. And like, I like always coming up with a slightly new concept when I'm making a new record, because I think like in the idea about what something could be, there always lies some surprise. And I like that. I don't really like repeating myself that much. So so these recordings that I made in that studio, which were synced to video, obviously, because it's a live performance, right? I gave those to my friend Stefano Castagna, who is a really seasoned producer from Italy. Great, great guy, like lots and lots of experience. And he took those recordings and he started, adding to them and arranging them, but he arranged them in such a way that he never changed the timeline. So like when you're listening to the album, right? You hear the album, you hear the produced songs, then you watch the video and you see me actually play those produced pieces live, which is kind of like, and that was my idea. Let's do something where people will wonder, how is it possible? How is it possible that he can kind of like, replay that? And that was sort of the idea. So it's kind of like some, you could say, studio trickery. Um, but I think the results are just wonderful. And Stefano is such a sensitive guy. Like he sang on top of it, like only like ambient vocals and stuff like that. But and he was whistling, and like it's in some places it sounds like Ennio Morricone, like a soundtrack and stuff like that. And it's really, I think it's a really, really great album. And um, the partner who business partner who helped me put it out also on vinyl. Uh, he really believes in the product, and thus also like actually produced vinyl for it, which I mean, I've had quite a few vinyl releases over the years, but like nowadays it still seems to be something special if there's the actual physical disc right in your hands.
This is a soundscape type album. And when people hear that, they think of, like you mentioned, ambient style music where you're in a massage parlor or something and you're relaxing. But this goes further than just a background filler. This is something you can actually sit down and enjoy. It's almost
Yeah,
as if Pink Floyd decided to do a soundscape album or something.
yeah, exactly. And that's sort of like my idea that the music, even though it is could be relaxing. It's also sort of like a composition, if that makes sense. More in the sense of um like a chamber group would play. Like before there was recorded music, people would actually get together and play together. Like so the folk music aspect, let's say, to me is very important. And I think I bring that into the more ambient world where there's, let's say, actual playing, right? Not just pushing down a few keys, yeah. And I like, I love music that goes from A to B, let's say, that it doesn't have to, and you don't know, well, obviously you start where you are, but you don't know where you end up. And I like that, where sort of the form is open, but since I'm a human being and I have a memory, right? Like when I'm improvising, I can always refer back to something that I did a minute ago. So, and that's sort of like how I combine like total freedom, let's say, to play anything that comes into mind, and but I can also bring back themes and ideas from early on in the piece, and that's sort of like how I can create compositions in the moment. I mean, it requires practice, obviously, right, to be able to do that. But that's the kind of thing that I love, and like a lot of ambient music has sort of like a different nature, like where there's not so much about the structure in time, let's say. Well, I don't want to say that way, but it's sort of like you see, for me, I like the idea of genre mashups of like because like I said I just love music so much. I love Euro dance music, for example. I like it. It's like it's cool. It makes me, I just can enjoy any kind of music, and I try to bring that into my own music. And on Sea of Hopeless Angels, there's a track with sort of like a 90s loop, dance groove loop in there. And yeah, I just love keeping and being experimental.
Is that how you've always written music, or have you ever tried to just sit down and write a song?
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, and like I said, I love exploring. So sometimes I just, I like the intuitive approach where you just write something intuitively, or I would sit down and write down a certain idea where I say, okay, you're not allowed to use a minor chord, for example, right? So I would write a song just with major chords or something like that. This conceptual, and like it's really interesting because you could say like it could be pretentious to use a concept, right? But it's not. It's more about like making new things happen,
Mm.
right? And yes, yes, I've worked in so many fields in music, um, and I do write songs as well. Interestingly enough, I sometimes forget about that even, right? But yeah, yeah. And with Stickman, even like we have a couple songs that are really I find actually quite strong, like for people who are known for instrumental music. Um, yeah, yeah, all sorts of styles. And actually, I kind of started out as somebody who was not really playing an instrument. So I was taught in music school to read music, and that was also the way that I was thinking about music, as sort of like the written, so like write down the pitch. Yeah, you play an E, and the E is a quarter note long, and blah blah blah, and you would compose like that, actually without the sound in your head, just purely on the conceptual level of what does it look like on the page. And I still do that sometimes as well. Yeah.
You have some lighter tones, and then you have some that are a little darker. What makes you decide how you want that song to end up that way?
You know what? Like in that moment, I always believe that I'm not being influenced by anything. Like I believe that I'm free. But in hindsight, I can always see like where that mood, let's say, comes from. There's always some external event, or just like something private that sort of triggers the expression. But I have to say, it's not like a one-to-one thing. It's not like when I feel bad, let's say, that I'm making dark music, it can be quite the opposite. Sometimes it's like if I'm in a really jolly mood, I can actually do pretty dark stuff because I don't care. You know what I mean? Right? And so yeah, but I love that about music because it's really something that seems to be sort of like potentially removed from humanity, let's say, right? Like it exists just in the sound of the wind and the trees and blah blah blah, the birds, right? But then also as humans, we can kind of like dive into the world of music and sound and kind of start sculpting it. And in a way, like the people who manipulate sound, which are musicians usually, are those that kind of like create that bring it's sort of like the most basic form of bringing structure into the world somehow, I find.
What about the sound effects that you use? Do you determine that, or has it been Stefano?
On that album, it's a collaboration. Like the original recordings, like all the sound effects were chosen by me, and they're but like it was a multi-track recording. But multi-track for when I improvise means basically two stereo tracks, where the first stereo track is sort of like what comes from the instrument direct. Well, maybe already with some reverb or delay or something like that. And then I'm also running a feedback looper on my laptop. um, I can explain what that means. And that's the other two channels. That's the other stereo signal, right? And so these four channels, these two stereo signals, they make the composition then. And Stefano um, added all sorts of stuff. He was also able, because these two stereo tracks were recorded separately, he could kind of like fade out the looping part, or he could take out the lead part and stuff like that, and kind of sculpt by chopping. Like I said, he wasn't moving anything in time, but he could mute stuff if you wanted to, right? And
Mhm.
so yeah, the sound effects, that's mostly it's a collaboration, right? Quite simply. And Stefano has a great wonderful little studio in the north of Italy, and he loves doing like experimental things. So for example, he has like a contraption he built, which is which is like aluminum pipes or something that he kind of put into this big box, and he put speakers on this one side of the pipes, and at the bottom he has microphones, and so he can use that contraption as a resonator, so he can send signals into it. So rather than using digital reverb or delays or resonators, he would actually create physical objects that do that, which is just fascinating. And I think that contributes to the organic quality of our work together, is that he treats sound as if it's something um like tangible. Like a lot of that has. And I don't know how old you are, Kyle, but like in the 80s or even like in the 90s, sound was something that you could still hear. You could still feel it in the room when the amp was turned up, right? But and I have to admit, I never, I mean, I did own an amp once when I was like 15 for a bass guitar, bass amp, right? But like for my guitar, I've never really actually owned an amp. So whenever I meet people who like to actually make the sound physical, I enjoy that very much.
You played with guys from King Crimson. Is that intimidating to play with guys at that level?
No, not intimidating to me, because like I said, for me, I felt like I knew, I knew, it's difficult to say, but I sort of like knew that music. It was kind of like part of my interest for like, I love that kind of music. So I knew I was capable of contributing something that was sort of like true to that expression, let's say, right? So, but I remember like the very first show I played with Pat Maslaughter and Tony Levin. um, it really felt like because I was thinking, okay, these guys are so powerful, right, as musicians, like really powerful. So what will it feel like to me when I'm actually playing in front of an audience with them, right? And it's really like a bulldozer kind of situation, right? So either you find a way to run with it, well, or they'll flatten, they'll flatten you. And it worked out. It worked out. Still remember the very first show already it was already working. I did not feel like I could not stand the pressure, right? It felt right. And then obviously it took a couple years, to find my place and kind of like, you know, I started it with the idea of being a very, very good sideman so that they could actually shine. That was my aim. I wanted to give them the space and also the security that they could really shine. And and then, like after 3, 4 years, that kind of like changed, and we became more of a band unit, let's say.
Were they very accepting when you first started playing with them?
Yeah, they were because also like I had already played with and worked with Pat Maslow a few years before, and Pat knew. Like, I remember one situation actually, like I'm right here at Pat's, I'm sitting in a trailer here. Uh, we were up there in the studio and I played some bass for a track that we were working on about 20 years ago. Right? And it was Richard Page's bass guitar. So the one that the guy from Mr. Mister, the singer of Mr. Mister.
Right, right.
And so I was asking Pat, like, how is it? Like, how does like when I play, how does it relate to your experience, like recording with other people, like in the studio? Because at that point, Pat already had like 30, maybe even 40 years of experience recording in studios. And he said, Marks, you're fine. It's fine. It's like there's no difference, he said. Like you can do as well as any other professional I've played with. And that was quite encouraging. And that was before I joined Stickman with Pat and Tony. And so I knew I can do it. It was just really like the like if you want to like the conflicts, let's say, which we didn't have between the musicians. It was more sort of like with the sound engineer because he would have to learn to accept me first. It was more there, like on that end, really. So not on stage. And also for me to learn the etiquette of being on the road, like taking responsibility of your own stuff, like like understanding what it means when there is a 6 o'clock lobby call, for example, right? That you got to be there 5 minutes earlier because you leave at 6. That's what lobby call actually means, in our band, and stuff like that. And that's something that required kind of like learning and um, but like we have never in like 14 years of playing together, we've never had like a proper argument or anything. And I think that shows in the music. I think that's really something special. And I mean, how many bands are there that actually stay together for 14 years? Like not that many. Maybe the Red
Very
Hot Chili.
right. You gotta tell me about the album cover.
Yeah, yeah, that's kind of like interesting and a little bit tragic. So um, Stefano's friend Aldo, I think is his name, Aldo. I don't want to say the wrong name. Um, he was Stefano had worked with him in the early 80s already. They've been good friends, and Aldo was a contemporary artist, so making all sorts of interesting artwork um, with different medium. Like he was even knitting stuff, and but also he did video art. So in the early 80s, he did like these video feedback experiments, and Stefano like always wanted to sort of resurrect that artwork. And so what we did, we actually used stills from the video feedback, VHS tapes or something that he still had, and created the cover from that of that. Oh, but we also made um, a visual, like a video for each song on the album with that material, with Aldo's material. And so I remember when Stefano first told me about Aldo, he said that Aldo is very ill. So so I know you already know, like I think you do, like he died, and he just died even before he got to see the album, right? And anyway, but it's sort of like it feels wonderful sort of to see. I mean, here's like another aspect about making music with other people that you, um, it actually brings something to our lives, not just to the listener, like to the musicians. And if you're working with somebody and you see, okay, there's something like we can create something beautiful and great together, then it sort of like gives a certain kind of satisfaction. And I think that satisfaction kind of like becomes, at least for me and for Stefano, more important the older you get. Right. So because you're doing something that is, and in the case of Stefano, who's basically, I mean, not really, but basically retired. He could retire, you know, like it's good to see how such emotional bonding with your product, let's say, really gives you so much back. There's so much in it for the creators themselves. And I really find, like in general, that that's something that I've appreciated so much about being a musician, is that that satisfaction that I and we can have by creating this experience for ourselves and the experience for like the live audience or even to the listener of a record. And that in this case includes Aldo's artwork, you know.
And what's been the greatest hurdle in your life?
Greatest hurdle. That's a great question. That's a wonderful question. Nobody's ever asked me that. So thank you. I think it's overcoming my fear of life and fear of the world. And it's an ongoing struggle. I I feel like I was born being with anxiety. Like lots of people I can't tell because I'm a very calm person and like, like also strong person. Um, but like I would say my natural state of being is one of being anxious, right? And like boiling inside also in a way. And that's also where all the power comes from to create. And so it's not something bad per se, but I there are certain situations where I can still feel it a lot, which is always like a week before I go on a long tour, for example. Like I feel horrible. Like I don't want to go, I feel so anxious. And then once I get going, everything's fine. But this the literal hurdle, I still remember that as a child, like going like maybe first or second year in school, believe it or not, like really small. I remember that like we had started having these whatever, like these little tests in school, right? Writing or maths, I can't remember. And then it dawned on me like that it's like that life is like there's the hurdle there, you're here, you you make it over the top, right, of the hurdle, and you expect relief, right? But for me, there was always like the next hurdle right there. That's sort of like the visual I had about life as a child, and that's the literal hurdle that I'm still trying to manage with, to feel less of that um uh dread or whatever. I don't know.
Well,
Does that make sense?
yeah. The thing is, especially if you grew up in that kind of middle class, you were teeter-tottering on you could be poor the next day, but then you might have some money the next day. And
Exactly.
there was always that, are we going to have that meal on the table? And you know how it was, especially if you're a boy, if you fell down, they told you shake it off, be a man, and keep going. You didn't really get to talk about your feelings of, especially if it was
Yeah.
anxiety and depression and all that.
Yeah.
And
I didn't even know such like those terms existed, right? I didn't even know that was a thing. And also like my parents, I think they were very good at keeping things away from me, right? Like so I never knew if we had enough money to have food on the table because there always was food on the table. So in a way that also kind of like possibly created some sort of divide, you know, because they kept information from me and just to protect me, right?
yeah.
So, but I come from a not even middle class, like working really lower working class background,
Mhm.
and that's it's still fascinating to me that like that mindset, let's say, or that feeling, like that way of being or feeling inferior in a sense, let's say, right, or not worthy. Um, still still there. Like, I mean, it's not that I'm thinking about it all the time, but when I realize, oh, okay, I actually have a family, I have a nice home. I live in Berlin, Germany. I have a really nice home. Um, and I can tour the world. I have great friends. I make music that I enjoy. Like everything is good, right? And at the same time, there's always that nagging, uh, well, not always, but sometimes, that voice comes back up. You know?
Exactly what you mean. Now,
Yeah.
the album, is it out now or is it coming out?
Yeah, it is. It's sort of was what we call a soft release, like these days, because it can be really challenging to coordinate like a digital release with vinyl, for example, because the lead times on vinyl can vary between, like, if you're lucky, like a few weeks or like a year, right? So no, but I know for a fact that vinyl and CDs are available. They have been produced. The album is available digitally at markusreuter.bandcamp.com. That's where I'm keeping all of my it's Bandcamp is great because people can buy directly from the artist, right? So yeah, just type Markus Reuter into the search field in Bandcamp and you'll find a lot of stuff. Yes, it is. It is out. It is out. And on this recent tour we did with Stickman, we sold quite a few vinyl copies. Like vinyl is really like it's back. Like I wouldn't have expected it's back as merch on tour, right?
Right.
Uh, which is good, but also bad because we have to schlep those boxes every night.
You got to earn that dollar, man.
Yes, yes. No, it's a wonderful thing to have, like, to have an album which really sort of like, remember, like, when I got my, the first few albums I bought as a child, like as a 10-year-old or something, and you actually have that physical thing, and you can read the liner notes, and I just love that. And I was just thinking the other day. So I went to a show, to a rock show when I was 10 years old, and that really made me a musician, right? I think. And so on the cruise ship that I was on, there was one of the musicians that has played at one of my very first rock shows was Simon Phillips, the drummer. Like, you know, and I didn't speak to him, but it's just so interesting to see, okay, so there's like a generation of musicians that influence a new generation of musicians. And now that I've toured the world and played, like, I don't know how many shows I played in my life, maybe six, 700 or something, not more than that, but still. And to realize that at some point in my life, there will be a young man or woman, or, and would come to me and say, Marcus, I saw you there. And I wanted to become a musician, and now I'm here and I'm playing bass with this band, and I'm kind of looking forward to that moment when that happens, where I see that, like the generationally, we as musicians have kept passing on the the love, let's say, right?
Right. What about the video portion of it?
Um, So video, for Sea of Hopeless Angels, like I said, like the Aldo Grazzi videos. So we have visuals, just visuals, and then for a couple tunes there are, and I think only one's been released so far. I'll release the other video pretty soon, which is actually the actual live footage of me in the recording studio, recording my tracks before Stefano added his stuff. So, and it's fascinating because, like, you see the piece being created live in the moment, but with those additional elements. And like, you'd ask yourself, like, why? Well, how does that work? And there's actually one really interesting thing about there's one track called Blood Gold, and it has this moment where I'm using the laptop to loop myself when I play, right? I'm using the keyboard to start and stop the loopers, right? And so, like, you can see me in the video, you can see me push a key, and in the actual performance, that was sort of like where I was, looping myself, right? But in the video, like because what Stefano put a beat underneath the track, it looks as if like when I'm pushing the key, the beat starts. As if I'm starting the beatbox, right? But no. Uh, and yeah, and those are just, I think, great, and I hope like some people will watch those, because you can see how that music is created live in the moment. You can hear the different kind of tones I can get from the instrument, like really clean, kind of like pristine, kind of like sounding, um, yeah, almost like Strat-like tones, let's say, and but also like this dirty, distorted stuff, like bass tones, and all the experimental ambient textures that happen in the background, right? And yeah, I thanks for reminding me, because the well, you've responded to the PR mail out that we made, right? And there's going to be a few more activities that we're going to run about this album, and that includes the release of all those videos. Yeah,
Do you have a personal website?
yeah, it's markusreuter.com, and Markus with a K, and Reuter, Reuter, and that's where people can find yeah, most of the relevant information about me.
And what all social media are you on?
I'm mostly active on Facebook, but I also do some Instagram. And YouTube is actually also just like for you, like an outlet for stuff I do. And I also for a time during COVID, I did some interviews with people, which you
Mhm.
can find on my YouTube channel. Actually, like the YouTube channel maybe is in a way, and I hate to say it, like the most active or the most frequented part of social media. Facebook has been good because I started early, like in 2009 or something, and there's a good community of people that I can reach, and like reach more or less directly. How hard it is sometimes when the algorithm doesn't, show
Yeah.
your
Know
update and
all
stuff.
about that.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, but that's it. Like YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and my website. Yeah.
I will put all those links in the description to make it easy for folks to find you. But Markus, thank you so much for coming on my show, man.
Hey, Carl, so wonderful to meet you and to see that we're literally neighbors right now.
Right? Yeah, you're up here in Austin.
Yes, yes, yes.
But yeah, thank you again. And also want to thank all you folks out there. If you are new to the channel, I hope you'll come back. Please hit that subscribe button from our regulars. You guys rock because you make it possible for me to do this. Until the next one, everyone, please take care. Be kind to one another. God bless and peace.